What if the moment your hair started thinning had nothing to do with age at all? What if it began years earlier, quietly, invisibly inside your body? That idea alone makes people uncomfortable because it challenges everything they've been told. In the United States, more than 80 million adults are dealing with noticeable hair thinning or hair loss right now, according to data cited by the American Academy of Dermatology. And yet the majority are still told the same explanations on repeat: genetics, hormones, stress, getting older, explanations that sound logical but fail to answer one critical question. Why does hair loss accelerate so suddenly? Why does it seem to appear almost overnight, even in people who were fine just a few years earlier? Large U.S. observational studies show that hair follicles don't fail randomly, they weaken gradually, long before the first strands appear on a pillow or in a shower drain, and by the time hair loss becomes visible, the biological damage has often been developing for 5 to 10 years. Hair follicles are living organs, each one supplied by a web of microscopic blood vessels, immune cells, and regenerative stem cells, and when that supply system is compromised, follicles don't scream for help, they simply shut down. Here's the part that shocks most people. Research from U.S. cardiovascular and dermatology journals shows that microcirculation declines steadily after age 35. Even in people with normal blood pressure and cholesterol, meaning the smallest vessels, the ones feeding the scalp, are often the first to suffer, and once blood flow drops below a critical threshold, follicles enter a dormant state. This isn't theory, this is measurable biology. Studies using laser Doppler imaging in American research hospitals show that adults with thinning hair often have 20 to 40% lower scalp blood flow compared to age-matched individuals with dense hair, even when their overall circulation appears normal on standard medical tests, and circulation is only part of the picture. The second silent trigger is chronic low-grade inflammation. According to data from the CDC, over 60% of U.S. adults now live with measurable inflammatory markers linked to diet, insulin resistance, and nutrient imbalance. And inflammation doesn't need to be extreme to damage hair follicles. It only needs to be persistent. Low-level inflammation disrupts the hair growth cycle, shortening the anagen growth phase and pushing follicles prematurely into the resting and shedding phases, which is why people experience gradual thinning instead of sudden baldness. What makes this especially dangerous is that inflammation rarely causes pain in the scalp, so people assume nothing is wrong, while follicles are quietly being starved of oxygen and nutrients. Then there is the nutrient delivery problem. U.S. nutrition surveys show that a significant percentage of adults are deficient in key micronutrients involved in hair follicle metabolism, including iron, folate, magnesium, and antioxidants, even among people who consume enough calories, meaning the body is fed but not nourished. The scalp is not a priority organ. It is optional from a survival standpoint. When nutrients are limited or poorly absorbed, the body redirects resources toward the brain, heart, and vital organs, leaving hair follicles underpowered, and once follicles sense scarcity, they conserve energy by shrinking, producing thinner hairs, or stopping growth altogether. This is why hair loss often accompanies fatigue, brittle nails, slow wound healing, and cold sensitivity, symptoms that many Americans dismiss as normal aging. In reality, these are early warning signs of systemic imbalance. The most overlooked factor of all is that hair loss is not a cosmetic issue, it is a biological signal. And U.S. population data consistently show that individuals with significant hair thinning often have higher rates of insulin resistance, vascular dysfunction, and inflammatory stress compared to those with healthy hair density. Hair tells the truth before blood tests do. By the time a doctor confirms a deficiency or metabolic issue, the scalp may have been struggling for years. This is why topical treatments, medicated shampoos, and aggressive styling solutions rarely solve the problem. They attempt to stimulate a system that lacks the internal resources to respond. You cannot force growth where circulation is compromised. You cannot grow thick hair where inflammation is unchecked. You cannot sustain follicles that are nutritionally starved. The real shock is not that people lose hair. The shock is how long the body tries to compensate before hair finally gives up. U.S. longitudinal studies tracking adults over decades show that hair thinning often accelerates after periods of dietary decline, weight gain, chronic stress, or illness, events that silently alter blood flow and inflammatory balance without triggering immediate symptoms. Hair loss is rarely sudden, it is delayed. It is the visible consequence of years of silent biological neglect. And once this perspective becomes clear, one truth stands out. Hair does not need stimulation. It needs support. Support for blood flow. Support for cellular repair. Support for immune balance. Until those systems are restored, no product, pill, or procedure can override biology. And that is why the solution to hair loss is never found in the mirror. It is found in the systems that decide whether hair is worth growing at all. Most people believe hair growth is about stimulation, about forcing follicles to wake up, scrub harder, massage more, apply stronger products. But biology doesn't respond to force, it responds to signals. And one of the most powerful signals the human body recognizes is nutrient availability. In the United States, dietary pattern analysis from the USDA shows that fewer than 10% of adults consume the recommended daily intake of leafy green vegetables, and this single statistic explains far more about hair loss than most people realize, because hair follicles don't just need calories, they need biochemical permission to grow leafy green vegetables, especially spinach. Deliver that permission in a way few foods can, not through one magic compound, but through a coordinated activation of blood flow, oxygen delivery, mineral transport, and immune regulation. Spinach is rich in naturally occurring dietary nitrates, compounds that the body converts into nitric oxide, and nitric oxide is one of the most important molecules for vascular health ever identified. According to U.S. cardiovascular research, nitric oxide helps relax and widen blood vessels, improving circulation to small capillary networks, and studies conducted in American medical centers show that nitrate-rich vegetables can increase microvascular blood flow by brighter 15 to 25%. Within weeks. This matters because the blood vessels feeding hair follicles are among the smallest in the body, narrower than a human hair itself, and when nitric oxide production declines with age, these vessels constrict. First U.S. aging studies show nitric oxide availability drops steadily after age 40, contributing to reduced scalp perfusion even in people with no diagnosed cardiovascular disease. Spinach helps reverse that decline. It delivers nitrates in a form the body recognizes as food, not medication, allowing steady nitric oxide production without spikes or crashes, and improved blood flow means more oxygen reaching follicles, more glucose entering follicle cells, and more efficient removal of metabolic waste. But circulation alone does not explain the thickening effect. Spinach is also one of the richest dietary sources of folate, a B vitamin essential for DNA synthesis and cell division, and hair follicles are some of the fastest dividing cells in the body. CDC nutrition data shows that nearly 40% of U.S. adults have suboptimal folate levels, particularly adults over 50, and when folate is low, follicle cells struggle to divide properly, producing weaker hair shafts and shorter growth cycles. Spinach supplies folate in its natural form, accompanied by vitamin C, which enhances absorption and protects folate from oxidative damage, creating a biochemical environment where follicle stem cells can function normally. Then there is iron. Iron deficiency remains one of the most common nutrient deficiencies in the United States, especially among women, and NIH data shows that up to 20% of women over 45 now have low iron stores. Even when hemoglobin appears, normal iron is essential for oxygen transport, and without adequate iron, red blood cells cannot deliver oxygen efficiently to the scalp, leading to follicle fatigue and premature shedding. Spinach contains non-heme iron, along with vitamin C, improving iron uptake and supporting steady oxygen delivery to hair follicles. Over time, magnesium is another overlooked factor. U.S. dietary surveys show that nearly 50% of adults do not meet recommended magnesium intake, and magnesium plays a key role in vascular tone, inflammation control, and protein synthesis. Low magnesium contributes to blood vessel stiffness and increases inflammatory signaling, both of which restrict nutrient flow to follicles. Spinach provides magnesium in a highly bioavailable form, supporting relaxed blood vessels and improved nutrient transport. But perhaps the most underestimated benefit of spinach lies in its anti-inflammatory profile. Chronic low-grade inflammation is now recognized as one of the main drivers of follicle miniaturization, and according to CDC data, over 60% of U.S. adults got to exhibit markers of chronic inflammation linked to diet and metabolic stress. Spinach contains carotenoids such as lutein and beta-carotene, powerful antioxidants that help neutralize oxidative stress and regulate immune signaling. Oxidative stress damages follicle stem cells, shortens the growth phase of hair, and accelerates aging of the scalp environment. By lowering oxidative stress, spinach helps protect the delicate cells responsible for generating new hair fibers. U.S. nutritional epidemiology studies consistently show that diets high in leafy greens are associated with lower inflammatory markers such as C-reactive protein, a biomarker linked to hair thinning and poor tissue regeneration. Another overlooked mechanism involves insulin sensitivity. High blood sugar and insulin resistance impair blood flow and increase inflammatory damage to small vessels, including those feeding the scalp. CDC data shows that more than 1 in 3 U.S. adults has prediabetes or insulin resistance, often without symptoms, and insulin resistance has been associated with increased hair shedding and reduced hair density. Spinach has a low glycemic impact and supports insulin sensitivity through its fiber and micronutrient profile, helping stabilize blood sugar and protect vascular health. When insulin signaling improves, blood flow improves, inflammation decreases, and follicles receive a stronger growth signal. Hair thickening does not happen because follicles are forced to grow. It happens because the body feels safe enough to allow growth. Spinach sends that message quietly, consistently, and biologically. It tells the body that minerals are available, oxygen is flowing, inflammation is under control, and energy supply is stable. Clinical dietary intervention studies in the United States have shown that participants who increase leafy green intake experience measurable improvements in vascular function within 2 to 3 weeks. Long before visible hair changes occur, follicles respond next. They extend their growth phase. They produce stronger keratin structures. They resist premature shedding. This is why people who shift their diet often notice hair texture changes before they notice regrowth. Hair feels thicker, stronger, less brittle because follicle output quality improves before follicle quantity increases. The mistake many people make is expecting instant regrowth. When the real transformation begins invisibly at the cellular level, spinach does not stimulate hair. It restores the environment hair requires to grow, and when the internal environment changes, follicles follow because hair growth is not a decision made at the scalp. It is a decision made by the entire body based on signals of abundance, balance, and biological safety. Hair growth has never been a beauty priority for the human body. It has always been a survival afterthought, and that single fact explains why hair thins, sheds, and disappears long before anything else fails. From a biological perspective, hair only grows when the body believes resources are plentiful and threats are low, and the moment that balance shifts, follicles are among the first systems to be downgraded. In the United States, metabolic health data from the CDC shows that more than 70% of adults careening live with at least one marker of metabolic stress, whether it is insulin resistance, elevated inflammation, impaired circulation, or nutrient imbalance, and these conditions send a clear message to the body that energy must be conserved. When energy is conserved, hair is sacrificed. Hair follicles require constant cellular division, oxygen delivery, protein synthesis, and immune protection, all of which are energy-expensive processes, and when the body senses stress, it shortens the hair growth phase to redirect fuel toward organs critical for survival. This is why hair loss often follows periods of illness, emotional stress, rapid weight loss, poor sleep, or dietary disruption, events that tell the nervous system that the environment is unstable. U.S. clinical studies on stress physiology show that elevated cortisol levels are associated with reduced blood flow to the scalp and shortened hair growth cycles, and chronic stress keeps cortisol elevated even when no immediate danger exists. But stress is not only psychological. Poor diet, blood sugar spikes, inflammation, and mineral deficiencies all activate the same stress pathways, and hair follicles respond by entering a protective shutdown mode. This shutdown mode is called follicle miniaturization, a process where follicles shrink, produce thinner hairs, and eventually stop producing visible hair. Altogether, American dermatology research has shown that miniaturization is strongly linked to microvascular dysfunction and inflammatory signaling rather than age alone. One of the most critical signals involved in this process is oxygen availability. Hair follicles require a steady supply of oxygen to maintain their growth phase, and U.S. vascular imaging studies reveal that individuals with thinning hair often have significantly lower oxygen saturation in scalp tissue compared to those with healthy hair density. This oxygen deficit is rarely caused by lung or heart disease. It is caused by impaired microcirculation and vessel stiffness. When capillaries narrow or lose flexibility, oxygen delivery drops, and follicles interpret this as a sign of scarcity. At the same time, immune activity within the scalp increases. Low-grade inflammation activates immune cells that surround follicles, disrupting stem cell signaling and accelerating the transition from growth to rest. U.S. immunology studies show that inflammatory cytokines such as TNF-alpha and IL-6 are elevated in individuals experiencing chronic hair thinning, even when no autoimmune disease is present. This immune interference weakens follicles from the inside, making them more sensitive to hormonal shifts and environmental stressors. Another overlooked factor is protein utilization. Hair is primarily made of keratin, a protein structure that requires adequate amino acids, zinc, and enzymatic support. But U.S. nutrition surveys reveal that while many adults consume enough protein, they often lack the micronutrients required to actually use it for tissue building. Without proper mineral balance, protein cannot be efficiently converted into keratin, resulting in fragile hair shafts that break easily and give the illusion of thinning. The body interprets this inefficiency as wasteful and reduces hair production further. Blood sugar stability also plays a major role. Repeated glucose spikes damage small blood vessels through a process known as glycation, which stiffens vessel walls and reduces nutrient delivery to tissues like the scalp. According to CDC data, over 96 million U.S. adults have prediabetes, a condition strongly associated with vascular damage long before diabetes is diagnosed. This damage is silent. It does not cause pain, but hair follicles feel it immediately. When blood sugar is unstable, follicles receive inconsistent fuel and oxygen, triggering premature shedding and slower regrowth. What changes everything is when the body begins to sense stability again. Stability does not come from stimulation, it comes from restoration. When circulation improves, inflammation decreases, blood sugar stabilizes, and nutrient delivery becomes reliable, the nervous system relaxes its survival grip. U.S. studies on lifestyle intervention show that improvements in diet quality and vascular health lead to reductions in stress hormones and inflammatory markers within weeks, even without weight loss. As these signals shift, follicles receive permission to exit shutdown mode. They lengthen their growth phase, they thicken the hair shaft, they reduce unnecessary shedding. This process is slow because biology prioritizes safety over speed. The body waits to see if the improved environment is consistent before committing energy to long-term growth. This is why hair regrowth is gradual and why people often notice improved hair texture and reduced shedding before visible density returns. It is also why aggressive treatments that ignore internal signals often fail. You cannot force follicles to grow when the body is still signaling danger. Topical solutions may temporarily increase blood flow, but without systemic support, the effect fades. The true shift occurs when the body believes it has enough oxygen, minerals, and energy to invest in hair again. American longitudinal studies tracking lifestyle changes show that individuals who improve metabolic health experience not only better hair outcomes but also improved skin quality, nail strength, and tissue regeneration. These changes occur together because they are driven by the same underlying signals. Hair growth becomes a reflection of internal balance rather than an isolated goal. And once that balance begins to return, follicles do what they were designed to do. They grow, not because they are pushed, but because the body finally allows it. Most people think hair loss is something that happens to them, something random, something outside their control. But biology tells a very different story, one where hair responds precisely to daily signals repeated quietly over time. In the United States, lifestyle pattern data from the CDC shows that nearly 90% of adults fail to meet recommended intakes for vegetables, fiber, and key micronutrients. And this long-term nutritional gap shapes how the body allocates energy, repairs tissue, and decides what is worth maintaining. Hair follicles listen to those decisions every single day. The body does not evaluate hair growth on motivation or hope. It evaluates consistency. And consistency is built through habits that stabilize circulation, blood sugar, inflammation, and nutrient delivery. One of the most powerful misconceptions is the belief that hair responds only to genetics. Genetics load the gun, environment pulls the trigger. US twin studies have shown that identical twins can experience dramatically different patterns of hair thinning depending on diet, stress exposure, metabolic health, and lifestyle choices, proving that genetic risk is strongly modified by daily biological inputs. The scalp is not isolated from the rest of the body, it reflects it. When blood vessels stiffen, hair suffers. When inflammation rises, hair thins. When minerals are depleted, hair weakens. The good news is that these systems respond to change faster than most people expect. US clinical nutrition studies show that measurable improvements in vascular function can occur within 2 to 4 weeks of dietary improvement, even in middle-aged and older adults. This does not mean hair suddenly grows overnight. It means the environment that determines hair's future begins to shift. Consistency matters more than intensity. The body does not reward extreme behavior. It rewards reliability. A daily pattern of nutrient-rich foods stabilizes nitric oxide production, supports capillary flexibility, and reduces oxidative stress, all of which improve oxygen delivery to the scalp. Fiber-rich vegetables improve insulin sensitivity and blood sugar stability, reducing glycation damage to small blood vessels. According to CDC metabolic health data, improved insulin sensitivity is associated with better microvascular circulation and reduced inflammatory signaling, two conditions directly linked to healthier hair follicles. Sleep is another overlooked signal. US sleep studies show that adults who sleep fewer than 6 hours per night have higher cortisol levels and increased inflammatory markers, both of which shorten the hair growth phase. When sleep improves, cortisol normalizes, blood flow redistributes more evenly, and tissue repair increases. Hydration also plays a role. Mild dehydration thickens blood and reduces plasma volume, making it harder to deliver nutrients to small vessels like those in the scalp. While often ignored, hydration status affects circulation efficiency, especially in older adults. Movement matters as well. Regular physical activity improves endothelial function, increases nitric oxide availability, and enhances insulin sensitivity. CDC data shows that adults who engage in consistent moderate activity have better vascular health markers than sedentary individuals, independent of weight loss. Improved vascular health means better scalp perfusion. But none of these habits work in isolation. The body reads patterns, not events. Eating well for a few days does not reverse hair loss. Sleeping well once does not restore follicles. What changes hair's trajectory is repetition, daily signals of abundance, daily signals of stability, daily signals that resources are available. This is why hair regrowth is often delayed. The body waits to see if the environment has truly changed before committing energy to long-term tissue investment. American behavioral health research shows that habits repeated consistently over 6 to 8 weeks begin to rewire stress responses and metabolic signaling, creating a new baseline of physiological safety. As this baseline stabilizes, hair follicles gradually re-enter a growth-favorable state. Shedding slows, strands strengthen, growth cycles lengthen, the scalp becomes less inflamed, blood flow becomes more consistent, nutrient delivery improves. These changes are subtle at first, often noticeable only in reduced shedding or improved texture, but they signal that the internal decision-making process has shifted. Hair does not grow because someone wants it to. It grows because the body has decided it can afford to. This is why chasing quick fixes often fails. Medications and topical products can alter surface conditions, but they cannot override systemic stress signals. When the body is still in conservation mode, hair remains expendable. The most powerful hair strategy is not aggressive, it is supportive. Support circulation, support metabolic balance, support nutrient sufficiency, support recovery. When those supports are in place, hair growth becomes a byproduct rather than a struggle. U.S. population studies consistently show that individuals who maintain stable metabolic health not only preserve hair density longer, but also experience slower aging across multiple systems. Hair becomes a visible marker of internal resilience, not because of luck, not because of genetics alone, but because the body has received enough consistent evidence that growth is once again safe.